Hi, my name is Mark Binkley, and I'm with DataQuest Solutions. And today we're going to look at the workflow solution that comes with PrintBoss from Wellspring and integrates to Sage 300 for payment processing, where you're able to move a set of checks through an approval process and then hand off to a third party to actually print the physical copy of the check and mail it. So this is really useful to anyone who needs to do remote processing, where if you have remote access to your Sage 300 system, you can completely do a hands-off check run, and you do not need to then physically handle the checks in any way, whether you're the individual who starts the check run or the individual who normally would sign a physical copy of the check. We can include a digital signature on the check, and the check signer would be the one who ultimately approves the check run to be then printed automatically by a third party as a physical document. So let's just kind of talk through the flow of this. With Sage 300, your data entry experience is no different than what you're typically used to with Sage 300. You would post your various AP invoices and then move on to your check run, whether you manually generate those checks in your payment batch or you do a system-generated check run. Either way would work the same. You simply would print the checks as if you were printing to a physical printer in your environment, but the PrintBoss module will intercept that print job and queue it up through an approval process whereby you've defined the sequence of individuals who are involved in approving those checks, and then the final individual in the approval series would hand off the check batch to be physically printed and mailed by Wellspring PrintBoss service. I do want to point out here that there are a couple of methods for how the check can be sent. The standard method is at $1.30 per check, and that includes the postage. So when you don't do anything other than the standard process, the check will get physically printed in a pressure sealed document where the envelope is part of the check itself, and then handed off to be mailed physically. And there's a tracking process that goes with that. And then the other option is if you need to have the delivery of the check expedited overnight or one of the various FedEx service types, there's a $5 handling fee by PrintBoss, which then hands that off to FedEx, and whatever FedEx charges for the service type you've selected gets added to the fee. So essentially you pre-fund an account with Wellspring PrintBoss, and then your individual check activity decrements your fund over time. I did want to point out that in this flowchart, we have an extra piece of software that I won't be demonstrating today, but we do have that profiled at dquest.com. It is ORCID's document management link. So if you are trying to do this whole process electronically, and the approver of the check is someone who would benefit from being able to examine the source documents of the various invoices, you can have a digital or electronic copy of the scanned invoices and any other supporting documents for matching attached to the invoice record. And if the check approver needs to investigate an invoice, they would simply go to Sage, inquire the invoice and vendor activity, and they'd be able to look at the individual scanned documents. So let's take a look at how this process works. So what we're looking at here is the Sage 300 check printing screen. You're probably already used to this screen, so we're simply going to start the check run. We'll begin in preview mode. You may or may not use preview mode today. And the way that PrintBoss gets introduced to the process is that PrintBoss has its own printer driver, and you just tell Sage that you've printed to PrintBoss instead of having selected your physical printer that you may be using today if you're producing hard copy checks. Or in fact, you may already be using PrintBoss and printing to blank check stock code. None of that would change introducing this process. The point being, we're handing this bundle of checks off to the PrintBoss application. So when we click print here, PrintBoss will process through the set of checks, and that's all that needs to happen at this point. We have not physically produced the checks anywhere. We've simply added them to the workflow approval console of the next individual in the workflow series. So at this point in the video, we are in the session, the Windows session, of the next person in the workflow series. So if you notice in the system tray in the lower right, there's a little icon that looks like it's a red copy of a check. And the role of that icon is to alert this individual that they've got checks that need to be approved. So if I were to just double click on that, it acknowledges that I've got documents that I'm going to process. And then I go into my PrintBoss application and open the workflow console. So to do that, I simply click on File and say Open Document Work Files. And from here, I have a list of the various workflow consoles if there were multiple types of documents that have workflow associated with them. We only have the AP payment type set up currently. So I would be able to highlight whichever one I'm interested in and click Browse. And now this is the list of checks that need my approval. So if we see here that we have 3 different checks, that was what was in the original check run. And then I have an Approve button at the top, Decline, I have FedEx, View, Print, etc. Although Print is available here, because I'm the next person in the workflow and there are people defined after me in the workflow who have print privileges, even if I tried to print these checks currently, I would not be able to. What can I do? I can look at the check if I like. So when I click on View, I can see what a printed copy of the check is going to look like and individually approve and decline as I scroll through these checks from a preview mode. So that would be one possibility. Or I can do Control A and while I'm looking at the list, and it would highlight the entire list, and I batch approve the entire list all at once. And I would like to point out too that as I go through and approve these individual checks, they fall off the list. So a couple of different scenarios that I might have here is perhaps this third check I am not wanting to decline. I just don't want to print it yet. The solution does support a check staying in this status indefinitely, even if new or additional check runs are issued to the system. Those additional check runs will just stack their records here until this approver moves them through their position in the workflow series. So if I needed to do some research but get everything else sent off to be printed right away because I don't have time to research until perhaps tomorrow, that is not a problem. So finally, let's just instead go ahead and decline this so we can demonstrate how decline actually works. So I'm going to say that I don't want this, and I could put in here whatever is my dispute reason so I can communicate that to the next person in the workflow series. So I'm going to end up here just clicking OK, and then that last record falls off my list in my workflow console. All right, so now we are back at the Windows session of the next individual in the workflow series. So in this example, this would be the individual responsible for actually handing off the checks to be printed by the PrintBoss printing service. And again, you notice that our system tray icon is red, indicating that it's ready for us to take our next step. So I'm acknowledging that I noticed that alert, and I go into the PrintBoss application and I open the workflow in my session. So I'm looking at my list of checks now, and if you notice, one of them is red. That's because that one got declined by the previous individual in the workflow. So you can see here that DQuest2 had user DQuest2 had declined this particular record. If I wanted to understand the reason for the decline, I could edit the check, go to the workflow tab, and what I had typed for my dispute reason is visible here, and now I could take the appropriate action. Likely I would need to go back to Sage since we'd posted the batch and reverse this check. Then our final step would be perhaps I need to have this particular check go out FedEx, and you simply click the FedEx button, and from here you would be able to fill in who is the recipient to which this needs to be sent, FedEx, and by what FedEx service it should go. So all of that is configurable individual record by individual record. Alternatively, I could just simply print my checks that need to be printed, and that's simply just clicking print here, and then we click print start. But I do want to point out that this particular system has it configured such that you actually can produce a positive pay file along with handing off the digital check run to be physically printed remotely on your behalf and mailed. So these two copy types in the PrintBoss system are defined. And that way, if anybody presents to your bank a fraudulent check that you have not informed your bank to expect, then that check would get rejected because it's not part of your positive pay file. All supported automatically by the PrintBoss application. So once we click print start here, that hands off this set of checks, and here we are actually producing the PrintBoss check run for the positive pay file. This is the file that you would end up uploading to your financial institution. And then we close that off, and if you notice under the column here, printed, it indicates that those two images were, or those two check runs were digitally sent to the check printing service, and the file has been created. The O stands for the file has been created for positive pay. And that's basically how the workflow process works. And I could just delete this rejected batch after I've decided, or sorry, this rejected check after I've decided how I'm going to handle that. Again, likely a reversal back in the Sage system because this check got declined. So we're going to end up just closing this workflow out and just looking at one last piece here, which is this logs solution. Here's where you're able to see records that are waiting to be processed by the online system. So if you did actually move it all the way through the process and you found that you should not do that, there is a grace period of anywhere from a few hours to a day or so that you would be able to, while it's in pending status, simply come here and cancel this check, and then it will not get processed by your remote check printing service. So now we can see that that check actually was moved to an error status, which is legitimate in this case. From cancel to error is the expected behavior. So that concludes this video. If you have any questions, please contact us at DataQuest. You can call 574-772-6100 or go to dquest.com and fill in our inquiry form and someone will contact you.